Violation confirmed, Karen said, folding her arms like she was delivering a court sentence. Basketball hoop installed without architectural approval. Your son was warned. My son was unconscious on the concrete. Let me say that again, I said, steady and low, staring her down as the ambulance doors swung shut behind Jalen. You just electrocuted a minor on private property, and I own the easement beneath your feet. Her eyes flinched, just once. She hadn't expected that. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. Name's Marcus Delaney. I'm not just a dad. I'm a licensed physical therapist with a background in neurotrauma recovery and pain mapping. I know exactly what a stun gun does to a 14-year-old's nervous system. And I also know what it costs in court. This isn't just about a basketball hoop. That backboard was the last thing my wife bought before the cancer took her. She ordered it 6 days before her final surgery. Said Jalen needed something to anchor him, to keep him moving, to keep him alive when she couldn't. I installed it 2 weeks after her funeral, bolted it into the driveway at sunrise while he was still asleep. He'd been mute for days, but that morning, when he saw it, he smiled. That hoop brought my son back to life. And now she, clipboard queen of Willow Ridge Estates, had decided it violated neighborhood aesthetics. The taser wasn't a warning. It was a message. Neighborhood security had arrived first, but they never touched her. One of them whispered to the other that the footage wasn't clear. I pointed to the ring cam above my garage. It's archived. Full HD. Audio too. She didn't blink. HOA policy allows enforcement discretion. My son isn't a code infraction. She stepped back then, slightly, as more neighbors filtered onto their porches. Some crossed their arms. Others turned away. Only Talia Meeks, from 3 houses down, stood with her arms around her 3 kids, her eyes locked on Jalen's sneaker still lying in the gutter. You'll be receiving a formal notice, she said. Noise complaints. Non-compliance. HOA security protocol is fully documented. I could barely hear her over the sound of the ambulance engine. Later, after they'd driven off and the flashing lights faded, I stood alone in the driveway, staring at the half-moon scuff. Jalen's foot left as he fell. I didn't feel anger yet. Not rage. Just cold. Calculating cold. I knew exactly what her actions meant and what they'd cost her, but I also knew how insulated HOAs like this one could be. Policy, protocol, committees. She wasn't acting alone, and if I wanted justice for my son, it wouldn't be enough to expose what she did. I'd have to make it expensive. The next morning, the notice was on my door. A fine for $1,200. Violation code 7.3.6. Unauthorized installation of recreational equipment. Threat of lien included. No mention of Jalen. No acknowledgement of the taser. Just legalese. Just paper. But I wasn't looking for apologies. I was looking for leverage. And in a community this obsessed with liability, I knew one thing for sure. They would protect Karen right up until she became a financial threat. So that's where I'd hit them. Starting with the HOA's insurance policy, and ending with her checking account. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with the house lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floor upstairs. Jalen had finally passed out after the hospital gave him something mild for the pain. His breathing was shallow, but steady. I kept replaying it all in my head. The taser click, the way he fell, the neighbors watching, most of them saying nothing. At 7 a.m., I stepped outside to grab the mail. That's when I saw the envelope taped to my front door. Willow Ridge Estates, HOA official. Violation notice. Same heading as before. Different fine. $1,200 for recreational noise and equipment installation without approval. Threat of lien included. No mention of the taser. No mention of injury. Just fine and consequence. Down the street, a few houses had their blinds cracked open, watching, quiet. I wasn't the only one they'd done this to. I took the notice, shoved it in my jacket, and walked straight to the neighborhood mailbox kiosk. It was just past the park, near the little shaded benches where parents usually chatted while their kids played. Only one person was there, Talia Meeks. 3 kids, 2 dogs, and a look in her eye that said she already knew why I was coming. "They got you too?" she asked. "They tased my son yesterday." Her lips parted. I heard the sirens, but oh my God, Marcus. Karen, she said it was an enforcement issue. Talia blew out a breath. They fined me for sidewalk chalk last spring, said it violated the visual uniformity clause. My twins are 6. You pay it? I couldn't afford not to. We're already on thin ice after the fence dispute. She reached into her stroller pouch and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were 8 violation letters, all unrelated, all signed by Karen. Noise, toys left outside, birthday balloons, playset shade color, she read aloud. You name it. It wasn't just about basketball, or chalk, or birthday parties. It was about control, quiet streets, predictable residents. Kids made that harder to manage. And families like mine, we made it harder to hide the bias. A man I didn't know walked up to his mailbox, glancing between us as he grabbed his stack. He paused, then tapped the HOA letter on top of his pile. They fined me for my truck tires, said they weren't standard profile. Been parked in the same spot for 4 years. I looked at him. You file a complaint? He laughed bitterly. And get another one next week? No, thanks. The fear was baked into this place. Karen's not just pushing paper, I said. She's manufacturing violations. Talia nodded. And the board rubber stamps all of it. I looked around the kiosk metal boxes, chipped paint, a single bulletin board pinned with HOA updates and lawn care notices. One sheet caught my eye. Upcoming board meeting, closed session member disciplinary review, signed by Brian Chan, treasurer. The only board member who didn't speak during Karen's driveway tirade. Maybe he was just another puppet. But maybe, just maybe, there was a crack in the wall. If Karen wanted to act like her clipboard gave her absolute power, fine. But that power came with risk. And if she thought she could hurt my son and hide behind policy, I'd make sure the financial blowback crushed every shield she thought she had. Later that afternoon, I pulled Jalen's hospital discharge forms, medical billing codes, itemized trauma assessments. I flagged every line that mentioned pain response, muscular recovery, anxiety risk. I knew the long-term implications of what Karen had done because I'd treated it in my patients, and I knew exactly how to document it in ways insurance companies couldn't ignore. She'd turned her rules into weapons. I turned the cost of her enforcement into a wrecking ball. The HOA clubhouse conference room was colder than I expected, not temperature tone, plastic chairs, a long laminate table, the smell of stale coffee and furniture polish. Karen sat at the head like she owned the place. Red blouse, HOA lanyard, folder already open, pen in hand. She didn't glance at me when I walked in. But Brian did. He was sitting 2 seats to her right, laptop open but untouched. His knee bounced under the table, and his fingers kept sliding up and down the edge of his mug without lifting it. Eyes fixed on the agenda. Not reading, just not looking at anyone else. I took the only open seat across from Karen. The other board members were present but silent. 3 men, 1 woman, all older, all carefully blank-faced. This is a compliance session, Karen began. Per HOA policy, the homeowner has been notified of multiple code violations. Let's not pretend this is about code, I interrupted. You assaulted my son, and now you're burying it under citations. That got her attention. She finally looked up, smug, composed. No charges were filed. Security footage was inconclusive. Because you wrote the incident report yourself, I said, and conveniently left out that I submitted HD footage from my ring cam showing you firing the taser. Brian blinked. His eyes flicked toward me, then back to the table. His hand finally touched the mug but didn't lift it. I acted within enforcement protocol, Karen said flatly. He refused verbal commands and made a threatening motion. He was holding a basketball. No one responded. I looked directly at Brian. You're the treasurer, right? He hesitated. Yes. Then you've seen the HOA liability insurance limits. Karen stiffened slightly. That was my opening. If I file a civil suit for injury to a minor and that claim is denied because your board authorized a non-security official to deploy force, you know what happens next? Brian's jaw tightened. His foot stopped bouncing. I didn't approve any use of force, he said quietly. But you approved the enforcement report, I countered, which means you accepted Karen's summary without reviewing the footage. I wasn't given the footage, he replied. Karen cut in. It wasn't required. I leaned in. So, you both signed off on a security incident involving a child without verifying what actually happened? Brian's hand finally gripped the mug, tightly, knuckles white. He started, then stopped. He shook his head slightly. That's not how this was supposed to work. Karen turned to him sharply. Brian, he didn't meet her eyes. We were supposed to hold a review meeting before finalizing the violation package. There was no time, she snapped. There it was. A fracture. Brian, I said, softer now. Do you know what a minor taser injury costs in recovery if psychological trauma is documented by a licensed therapist? His face changed. Not just guilt, now fear, because he knew what I did for a living. This doesn't have to go public, Karen said, trying to regain control. You're free to file an appeal. Oh, I'm not appealing, I said, standing. I'm compiling damages. This meeting? It's just more evidence. As I turned to leave, I glanced back once. Brian was staring into space, hands still gripping that mug like it might float away if he let go. He wasn't the enemy, not yet, but the guilt was already eating at him. I just had to give it time. Outside, the sun was blinding. My phone buzzed with a notification. Jalen's follow-up therapy appointment confirmed. Karen had made this personal. Brian had just made it crack, and I was about to make it expensive. 2 days later, I found a second envelope taped to my door. Final notice. Pending enforcement action. $3,600 now. 3 violations compounded. Threat of lien accelerated. The wording had sharpened. The legalese more aggressive. I stared at it from the porch for a full minute. Same slanted tape job, same red ink header, same silence from the neighbors. Karen wasn't just doubling down, she was trying to break me before I had a chance to respond. I pulled the notice free and walked to the curb. It was trash pickup day, and the street buzzed with bin wheels and idling trucks. Jalen was upstairs with earbuds in, silent. Talia's youngest rode a scooter past my driveway and didn't stop. I opened my mailbox and found a second letter waiting. This one from the HOA's Compliance Council, an outsourced legal firm 3 towns over. They were threatening legal action if I didn't remove the basketball hoop immediately and settle the outstanding balance in full and final payment within 5 business days. The language was different now. Not neighborly, not procedural. This was Karen weaponizing paper, bureaucracy as a cudgel. But in her rush to threaten, she'd overlooked something critical. She put it in writing. I scanned the QR code at the bottom of the legal letter. It linked to an online dispute resolution portal. I clicked through, documenting each section. The digital timestamp, the threat to lien, the photo of my driveway taken without consent, the claim that enforcement actions were conducted by board-approved personnel. And that right there was her mistake. Karen wasn't board-approved for enforcement. Brian had made that clear. She had acted without a formal vote, without security oversight, and without documented training, which meant everything in this letter was an unsupported legal threat, a bluff in a very expensive costume. Back inside, I scanned the documents into my client case notes system, HIPAA-compliant, time-logged, same platform I used to document injury reports for insurance companies. Every photo, every violation, every email, now cross-referenced, labeled, admissible. By the time I finished, it was nearly 5 p.m. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. But the transcript hit instantly. This is Alicia Gossman, legal counsel for Willow Ridge Estates, HOA. Mr. Delaney, we're open to resolving this matter outside of formal legal proceedings. I'd be happy to set up a call. They were blinking. I didn't call her back. Not yet. Instead, I walked outside, down to the end of the street, and took a long look at the community sign. Welcome to Willow Ridge Estates, a place to belong. I remembered when we first moved here, back when my wife was still alive. When Jalen was little and she used to jog ahead, sense of him, urging him to pedal faster. She used to say this place felt safe. That word meant something different now. It meant silence, obedience, falling in line, but not for me. I turned back toward the house. My son was watching from his window now, eyes barely above the sill. He gave me a little wave. I raised the violation notice in return and smiled. Let's make them pay, I whispered. The door to my clinic clicked shut behind me as I slipped on my white coat. For a second, I just stood there, breathing in the quiet. Clean air, eucalyptus oil diffusing in the front room, faint notes of piano music playing overhead. This was the one space in my life Karen hadn't touched. Not yet. My 10 a.m., the appointment was already in the rehab bay. A high school linebacker rehabbing a fractured ankle. His mother waved as I passed, but I barely registered it. My head was still back in my driveway, with the second legal letter and Gossman's voicemail. She wanted to resolve this matter. Translation: they knew they were exposed. They were trying to patch a leak before it became a flood. At noon, I closed the last file, stepped into my office, and called in a favor. Dr. Kevin Moreno picked up on the second ring. "Marcus Delaney," he said. "What's wrong?" "I need an insurance-level trauma evaluation for a minor who was tased on residential property by a non-sworn official," I said. There was a long pause. "Is the patient your son?" "Yes." "Where was it done?" "Willow Ridge Estates." HOA vice president deployed it herself. No prior approval, no security credentials, and now their legal team is threatening liens over driveway basketball violations. Moreno whistled. "That's reckless. And if the taser created any lingering neuromuscular disruption, they're financially cooked. Especially if the board didn't authorize force." "They didn't," I said. "I have evidence from a board member. You're sitting on a liability grenade." "I'm not just sitting," I told him. "I'm documenting. But I need confirmation, clinical, peer-reviewed, coded correctly. No soft language." He understood. We'd both been through this before with other patients. When a school let a restraint go too far, when a summer camp ignored concussion protocols. There's a difference between personal outrage and professional damage. Professional damage gets paid out. "I'll do a tele-eval," he said. "Send me his hospital discharge, any follow-ups, and the security footage if you have it." "I have ring cam with time codes and audio," I said. "Also have taser voltage data from the model she used." I pulled the specs this morning. "Jesus," he muttered. "You're building a tort case, not a treatment plan." "I'm doing both." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a moment. The overhead music had shifted. Low cello now, something sad but steady. I reached into my bottom drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Delaney, J. It was the same folder I'd started the day after my wife's funeral. Back then, it held therapy plans, nutrition charts, emotional behavior logs, tools to keep Jalen from vanishing inside his grief. Now it would hold medical codes, muscle response charts, legal notes, evidence. I slid in the new violation notice, highlighted the word enforcement, and circled board-approved personnel. Karen had given me exactly what I needed, a paper trail built on false authority. If her use of force wasn't covered by the HOA's general liability policy, and I was betting it wasn't then, any resulting damages were personal, not shared, not shielded. And this time, the damages wouldn't be minor. Outside my office window, two parents walked past with toddlers in tow. One of them pointed at the clinic sign and said something I couldn't hear. The other nodded. People were watching. Karen thought this would be quiet, private, contained, but I knew how lawsuits worked. The discovery process would drag this entire HOA structure into the light. And when that happened, every resident she ever fined would want to know what they could claim. What started with a taser would end with a number she couldn't afford. The call came during a patient stretch session. "Mr. Delaney, this is Nurse Cortez from Willow Ridge High. Jalen's in the office. He's okay, but..." He froze during morning drills, shaking. Says he feels like his heart's racing. I was out the door before she finished the sentence. By the time I got to the school, Jalen was sitting on the exam table, knees drawn up, arms crossed. He wasn't crying, but his jaw was locked, like he was holding something in his mouth he couldn't spit out. Nurse Cortez stepped aside as I entered. "No signs of injury," she whispered, but he flinched when I reached for his wrist. She didn't need to say it out loud. I took the seat next to him. "Panic?" I asked quietly. He gave the tiniest nod. "Did something happen?" He shrugged, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. "The gym lights popped when we ran out. Sounded like the taser." I nodded, gently. Cortez added, "This isn't the first time. He's been in here twice in 2 weeks. He doesn't tell his teachers." That gut punch landed deep, because I should have seen it. I knew what untreated trauma did. I'd treated kids like this, dozens of them. Frozen reflexes, hypersensitivity, sleep disturbances. The difference was, they weren't mine, but Jalen was. And now, I wasn't documenting symptoms for a client, I was watching my son fold in on himself. Outside, I signed him out for the day. He didn't say much in the car, just kept glancing out the window, shoulders hunched, like someone might be watching. When we got home, he went straight upstairs. I didn't follow. Instead, I walked into the garage and opened the case file. I stared at the photo of him mid-fall again. Ring cam, frame, time-stamped, high def. The moment everything changed. Then I opened the report from Dr. Moreno. It had arrived an hour earlier, structured like a medical legal deposition. Diagnosed stress responses. Onset of PTSD. Clinical recommendations for long-term therapy. Insurance billing codes already attached. My hand hovered over the keyboard, and then I began typing. Demand letter, $187,500. Itemized. Structured. Based on therapy, cost projections, documented loss of academic performance, emotional trauma, and professional damage potential. Not to scare them, not to bluff, to tell them exactly what it would cost not to settle. The moment I finished, I felt the shift. Not rage, not grief, commitment. I wasn't going to reason with them. I was going to ruin every lie they'd hidden behind. The HOA's general liability policy wouldn't cover emotional trauma from an unauthorized enforcement. Their DO policy wouldn't cover board negligence without a formal vote. And Karen? She wouldn't be able to pawn this off on policy anymore. She'd be writing checks with her own name in the corner. That night, after Jalen finally fell asleep, I sat in the living room and pulled the red envelope Karen had dropped off 2 weeks earlier. I scanned it, highlighted it, archived it. Then I emailed it with attachments to Alicia Gossman. Subject line, formal liability notification, minor injury. Delaney, J. No threat, no bluff, just numbers, big ones. And the trail to prove every cent. The last person I expected to text me was Brian Chan. Can we talk? Somewhere quiet, not HOA property. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the message. After everything, after his silence, his stammering in the clubhouse, the way he looked anywhere but at the truth, I wasn't sure if he was trying to help or cover himself. Still, I picked the place, the small study room at the downtown library. No cameras, no HOA badge scans, just books, filtered sunlight and walls thin. Enough to hear someone's guilt when it cracked. He showed up 10 minutes late, sweat under his collar, hair slightly damp, like he'd parked and walked in fast. He clutched a brown envelope like it was a bomb that might go off in his hands. I only have 20 minutes, he said, sitting down. I nodded. Then let's not waste them. He set the envelope down between us, but didn't slide it over yet. His fingers tapped the table, once, twice. Then he leaned in. She never had authorization, he said quietly. I didn't say a word. Just let him keep talking. I told her to wait for the new enforcement policy. Told her we needed board approval to implement personal engagement. She ignored it, said the board wouldn't care as long as it looked clean on paper. And you signed it anyway, I said. He winced. I didn't think it would go this far. I thought maybe she'd just file a few fines, bluff some noise violations. She tased my kid, Brian. His eyes dropped. I didn't know she was carrying, he said. She told me it was a safety deterrent, said she'd never use it. You watched the ring footage. You saw the fall. He nodded. And I've had nightmares ever since. Finally, he pushed the envelope toward me. Inside were two things: a printed email thread between Karen and the rest of the board, and a signed memo she'd drafted but never filed, asking for enforcement permission for herself. Dated 3 days after the taser incident. She tried to backdate it, sloppily. The email thread proved that. She wanted me to upload that version to the cloud archive, Brian said. Replace the original file. I didn't. My heart thudded once, deep and hard. This was more than guilt. This was a breach in her armor. Verifiable. Why are you giving me this now? I asked. He exhaled sharply. Because her lawyer reached out to me this morning, said if this goes to court, I'll be listed as a complicit party unless I support the board's version. She's covering herself. And throwing you under the bus. Exactly. I nodded slowly. This puts her in personal liability territory. He swallowed. I know. What do you want from me? Brian looked me in the eye for the first time. I want to help fix what she broke. But I need protection. You'll be subpoenaed. I'll comply. That changed everything. This wasn't just a guilty man trying to sleep better. This was leverage. And with that email thread and falsified memo, Karen was done hiding behind bylaws. When he stood to leave, I stood with him. We shook hands. His was damp, cold, but steady. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't answer. I just took the envelope and walked out. On the way back to the clinic, I called Gossman's office. "This is Marcus Delaney," I said. "You wanted to resolve this privately? You'll want to look at what I'm sending next." The conference room at Lawton and Reed was all dark wood and glass. Everything about it whispered quiet, power, thick carpet, brushed steel fixtures, legal journals lined like soldiers behind smoked glass. I sat across from Myra Lawton, civil litigation specialist, 40 years in practice. Sharp eyes, no small talk. She'd been my late wife's attorney during her disability dispute. I trusted her, like I trusted very few. She finished reading the memo Brian gave me and leaned back in her chair. "Your HOA president attempted to backdate authorization for a use of force incident against a minor," she said flatly. "That's insurance fraud, Marcus." I nodded once. "And if their insurer gets wind of this, they'll revoke coverage. Not just that." She tapped the edge of the page. "If you can prove damage is physical, psychological, and reputational, this becomes personal liability territory. Karen won't be protected by the HOA. Neither will any board members who knew. She didn't act alone. Number, but you've got one of them flipped." I opened my folder, laid out everything I'd built: medical records, Dr. Moreno's trauma eval, documentation of Jalen's school absences, progress notes from his therapist, itemized projections. Myra skimmed the damages page. $246,000? She asked. "Baseline," I said. "That's just therapy and future academic disruption. We haven't added pain and suffering, or punitive." She arched a brow. "You're coming in hard." She tased a child on private property while acting outside her authority. "I'm not interested in negotiation." She will be. We drafted the formal demand letter together. This time, it was bulletproof. Not emotional, clinical, calculated. It included the time-stamped ring footage, Brian's signed affidavit, side-by-side emails, proving the false backdating Moreno's diagnosis codes, Jalen's school nurse incident reports, estimated treatment plan costs over 5 years, all wrapped into a single number, $437,000. And a closing line Myra insisted on: "In the absence of a structured settlement offer within 10 business days, we will proceed with civil action and direct notification to the HOA's liability carrier, D.O. insurer, and regional media." It wasn't a threat, it was a countdown. After we finalized the letter, Myra leaned forward, resting her arms on the polished table. "I've seen this before," she said. "Small authority figures get real bold when they think their title makes them untouchable. But money talks. And your documentation? It's screaming." Outside the building, I stood on the curb, phone in hand, draft email loaded with attachments. I stared at it for a second, not hesitating, just feeling the weight. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about making sure my son never had to look over his shoulder again just because someone with a clipboard felt threatened by the sound of a bouncing ball. I hit send. 1 second later, Karen's legal team had the full package in their inbox. I got into my car, started the engine, and called the clinic. "Tasha," I said to my receptionist, "block out the next 2 days. No patients." She paused. "Everything okay?" "Not yet," I said, "but it will be." Because now, it was her turn to flinch. The HOA green space wasn't meant for protests, but that's exactly what it looked like by Saturday afternoon. 37 folding chairs, a long table with coffee and cheap donuts, no banner, no megaphone, just neighbors who had finally had enough. Talia organized it. She called it a casual compliance info session, which was her way of saying, "We're not afraid of Karen anymore." I showed up late on purpose, let the others speak first. Mothers with binders full of fines, retirees who'd been warned over lawn decor, a guy who'd been cited 3 times for parking his vintage motorcycle under a carport despite board approval. Every story added fuel to the fire Karen started the day she pressed that trigger. When I finally spoke, I kept it short. "I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to tell you what I've done." Then I pulled out a copy of the demand letter. Redacted, but still intimidating. I didn't pass it around. I just held it high enough for them to see the logo of the law firm at the top. "The vice president of this HOA used a weapon on a minor," I said. "And now she's trying to make it go away quietly." Brian Chan was there too, at the back, hood up, sunglasses on. But he didn't leave. He stood through all of it. And when I asked if anyone else had footage, emails, or letters they were willing to share, he stepped forward first. He handed me a flash drive. Karen had the board's legal correspondence forwarded to her personal Gmail, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. That violates confidentiality. It also created a trail. I took it with a nod. This changes things. The atmosphere shifted just slightly. It wasn't rage or rebellion, it was readiness. Later that evening, I cataloged every file on that drive. Email chains, internal memos, an early draft of the emergency enforcement policy that had never been approved but which Karen had cited multiple times in HOA letters. It included notes from her personal lawyer. One of them read, "We can't defend this position if she acted without a vote or training." There it was, from her own team. The pressure was building. The next morning, Myra called. They replied, she said. Karen's lawyer wants to explore non-monetary options for resolution. Translation, she's scared. She should be. Myra agreed. They asked what it would take to avoid formal litigation. I already had my answer. I drafted a reply that same hour. 1. Structured personal settlement of $5,000 divided by month for 60 months. 2. Formal resignation from the HOA board by Karen Whitmore. 3. Written apology submitted to board records. 4. No press gag orders. It wasn't about breaking her. It was about restructuring power. If they refused, we'd go public. I had local reporters ready. I had the footage. I had the affidavit. And I had a son who still flinched when lights buzzed overhead. I gave them 3 business days. That evening, Jalen came downstairs while I was reviewing audio transcripts. He didn't say anything at first, just hovered in the doorway, watching the screen. Then, "Is it gonna work?" "Yeah," I said. "It's already working." He nodded once and walked over. "What happens if she doesn't pay?" I paused, then closed the laptop and looked him in the eyes. "Then I take everything she thought she could hide," I said, "and I show the world what it really costs." Karen didn't show up for the meeting. She sent her lawyer instead, a man with a tight jaw and a leather briefcase, who introduced himself as Mr. Rhodes, representing Miss Whitmore. I didn't bother shaking his hand. We met in a small, sterile conference room inside a downtown office suite. Across from me sat Myra Lawton, composed as ever, her notes laid out like a firing squad. I had 1 folder. He brought 5. "You understand," Rhodes began. "This meeting is exploratory. Our goal is de-escalation, not capitulation." Myra smiled politely. "Our goal is accountability. Let's begin." He pushed forward a counter-proposal. $10,000 one-time settlement. HOA takes responsibility for the communication breakdown. Karen remains unnamed. I didn't even look at Myra. I leaned forward. "Number." He blinked. "Excuse me?" "Number. She doesn't get to hide behind policy anymore. You know why we're here. This isn't about the HOA. It's about her. Personally." Rhodes exhaled through his nose. "Mr. Delaney, I don't think you understand the risk of litigation." "Oh, I understand it perfectly, but Karen doesn't. And if she did, she wouldn't have tried to cover her actions with a falsified enforcement memo." He flinched, just slightly. I opened the folder, laid down Brian's affidavit, the time-stamped ring footage. The draft memo with metadata showing it was written after the taser incident. Then the email thread proving Karen tried to backdate it. Rhodes glanced at each document, face tightening with every page. "This is admissible?" "Every word." He glanced at Myra. "You're planning to go public?" She gave a small, dangerous smile. "Only if we're forced to." I pushed the final page forward, our formal terms. $5,000 per month, 5 years. Personal settlement. Karen's resignation. Apology submitted to board records. "No NDA. No media gag clause?" he asked. "Correct. She won't agree." "She will," I said, "when she realizes the court discovery phase would include her HOA emails, personal correspondence, and any complaints tied to previous enforcement actions." I let that hang in the air, long enough for him to imagine what else might come up. After a long silence, he stood. "I'll present this. Expect a response tomorrow." As he turned to leave, I added, "Tell her this isn't about vengeance, it's about cost. And she's the one who made it. Financial, the moment she tased a child." That night, I waited. The email came at 11:48 p.m. Subject, settlement terms, preliminary acceptance body, pending formal paperwork. Miss Whitmore agrees to the structured settlement and board resignation. Apology draft forthcoming. I stared at it for a long time. Not with satisfaction, with release. The fight was almost over, but the damage was done. My son still had therapy ahead, still had nights where he couldn't sleep without light, but I'd bought him something Karen never could. Relief. Jalen walked in a few minutes later, rubbing his eyes. "You're still up?" I turned the screen toward him. He read it slowly, then looked at me. "So she's paying?" I nodded. "Every month, until you're 19. He didn't smile, he didn't cheer. He just nodded once, like it made sense. Then he said, "Good. She should." And for the first time in weeks, he walked away without looking over his shoulder. The folding chairs filled up faster than anyone expected. Word had spread. The quarterly HOA meeting wasn't usually a big event, maybe a dozen regulars, a few newcomers asking about pool access or parking rules. But tonight, the clubhouse was standing room only. Every chair taken, people lined the back wall. Some brought printouts, others brought stories, and I brought the truth. Karen sat at the front table, lips pressed tight, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She hadn't resigned yet, technically. Her lawyer was still finalizing terms. But tonight's meeting would be her last as vice president. She knew it. The board president cleared his throat. "Before we move to budgetary items, Mr. Delaney has requested time to speak. The board has approved." I stood slowly and walked to the center of the room. No mic, no speech. Just the sound of neighbors shifting in their seats, waiting to see if the whispers were true. "I'm not here to rehash what happened to my son," I said, voice even. "Most of you already know. And if you don't, you've seen the footage by now." Murmurs rippled through the room. A few heads dropped, a few held steady. What I will say is this: when someone in power hurts a child and then hides behind policy, procedure, and silence, that's not governance. That's cowardice. Karen's head jerked slightly, but she didn't look up. I pulled a folded sheet from my back pocket and held it up. "This is the settlement agreement. Signed. She will pay $5,000 a month for 5 years. From her personal finances, not HOA funds." Gasps. Audible now. "This settlement exists not because she apologized, but because we cornered her legally. Because the numbers added up to something she couldn't afford to ignore." Brian Chan, sitting 2 rows back, met my eyes and nodded once. "This board failed to stop her," I continued. "Some of you enabled her, others looked away. But today, that ends." Talia Meeks stepped forward from the side of the room, holding a clipboard. "We've gathered signatures," she said, "enough to call a special election, effective immediately." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then building like a storm. Karen stood abruptly. "This is not a proper venue for this kind of action." "It's exactly the right venue," I cut in. "Because this is where you made my son into a threat. On this floor, with your clipboard, and your taser, and your silence." She looked to the board, but no one met her gaze. The president cleared his throat. "Karen, per bylaws section 4.2, a petition with more than 30 signatures triggers a mandatory vote. Your resignation is expected." Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't need her words. I had the paper, the check schedule, the digital trail, and the room. She sat down. Hard, like the weight had finally caught up with her. Outside, neighbors spilled into the courtyard, voices buzzing with relief, fury, and questions. Some came up to shake my hand. Others just nodded in thanks. One woman I'd never met leaned in and whispered, "I've been waiting 5 years for her to fall." Brian walked up last. "She'll file bankruptcy," he said quietly. "Try to duck the payments." "She won't," I replied. "Because the terms include wage garnishment if she defaults." He nodded, then looked toward the clubhouse doors, where Karen sat alone behind the glass. "You did what the rest of us were too afraid to," he said. "No," I said. "I just ran out of fear first." It was a quiet morning when the first check arrived. No knock, no signature required. Just a certified envelope in the mailbox with a return address in her lawyer's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I stood at the edge of the driveway and looked at the basketball hoop. The backboard still had that one crack across the side from where Jalen overthrew a shot the night after his mother's funeral. He'd thrown it too hard, angry at the world, angry at the silence. The fiberglass held anyway. So did we. Jalen stepped outside, barefoot, ball in hand. No music in his ears today, no hunched shoulders. Just him, tall and still growing, eyes clearer than they'd been in months. He bounced the ball once. "You gonna cash it?" he asked. I smiled. Eventually. He took a shot, clean arc, clean drop, nothing but net. That sound used to make Karen furious. Now it made me feel like the world was back on its axis. After everything, the threats, the paperwork, the legal war, we didn't win because someone said sorry. We won because we put a price on justice and made them feel it. Every bounce of that ball, that's $5,000 echoing back. The HOA restructured a month after the settlement. Karen's resignation triggered a series of recalls. Talia now runs community engagement. Brian stepped down quietly, but not before testifying during the final vote count. No more weaponized citations, no more forged memos. Just accountability. We're not friends with most of the neighbors, but we don't have to be. They wave now. They don't look away when Jalen's outside. That's enough. I kept the apology letter she was forced to submit. It's full of phrases like misjudgment of protocol and misunderstood intent. Not once does she say sorry, but every month the check comes, and every month I deposit it under Jalen's name. He'll use it for college, or therapy, or just to remember that standing your ground sometimes costs less than backing down. Me? I still run the clinic, still help kids recover from the worst things they shouldn't have had to survive. Only now, when a parent walks in with a face full of quiet fear, I know exactly how to look them in the eye and say, "You can win this, because I did." If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. This isn't just my story. It could be yours too. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.